Hello, children. The topic for today's discussion is weathering the storm in Ersama. Actually, weathering is a geographical term you might have learned in geography. Weathering means breaking or disintegrating. For example, weathering of rocks. They change the appearance by long exposure to the atmosphere. That's called weathering. But here the word weathering has been used in some different sense. Weathering here means managing, to manage the situation, isn't it? Weathering the storm in Ersama. Ersama is uh, a block headquarter in the state of Odisha. It is a small town. Okay, so this is the title, weathering the storm in Ersama. And this article is written by Harsh Mander, who is a social activist in India. And here he gives an account of the cyclone that had hit Odisha in October 1999. In the month of October in 1999, a very terrible storm had hit the Odisha seacoast and caused a large scale devastation. So this article is the account of that. And here in this article he has talked about a boy, a 19-year-old boy. His name is Prashant, and he helped in rescue operation, and he became a leader, and he helped the people in their rehabilitation after the storm. So that account is here, and the details we will see when we discuss the lesson just now. Okay, so this is the this introduction given in the book. The cyclone that hit Odisha in October 1999 killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. For two dreadful nights, Prashant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. On the third day, he decided to go to his village. Did he find his family? Marooned means cut off or stranded or isolated. Suppose all around there is water and you are marooned in between. You are stranded, you can't move. You are cut off from the other places. That's called marooned. Okay, for 2 days he was marooned. That we will see in the lesson when we discuss it. Okay, so the first paragraph goes like this. On 27th October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, that means Prashant's mother was dead when this incident took place. She was dead 7 years earlier. Okay, so 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small town in coastal Orissa. In coastal Orissa, Ersama is a small town which is the block headquarters. This block is smaller than the district. Block is a smaller unit than district. Okay, some 18 kilometers from his village. This place, Ersama, a small township, was 18 kilometers from his village. To spend the day with a friend, he had gone to his friend. He had gone to Ersama. In Ersama, his friend lived, and to spend a day with him, he had gone there. When he went there, the weather was all right. The weather was very clear. Okay, but in the evening, a dark and menacing storm quickly gathered. Menacing means very dangerous, very sinister, or very threatening, terrible storm started gathering. That is in the evening. Okay, winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury. Fury means extreme anger. Extreme anger that Prashant had never witnessed before. Heavy and incessant. Incessant means continuous, non-stop. Continuous or non-stop. Heavy and incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient trees, ancient means very old. Ancient trees were uprooted and crashed to the earth. The trees were getting uprooted because of the terrible or extreme speed of the wind. The wind was blowing at the velocity of 350 kilometers per hour, which uprooted even the old trees. Okay, screams rent the air. Rent means tore. tear, tore, torn, this tore. Rent means this is the past tense of rend, R-E-N-D, rend. So screams tore the air. Screams were let out in the air. People were screaming. That means screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. The angry waters swirled into his friend's house. Swirled means moved, twisting, spiraling, moved, twisting, or spiraling in round and round twisting movement. In round and round twisting movement, the angry waters entered into his friend's house, and there was uh, they uh, drowned neck deep in that water. Okay, the building was of brick and mortar. Mortar means either lime or cement. So it was a pakka building, not the mud house. So the building of his friend's house was a pakka house, strong house, which was made of brick and mortar. So it could withstand the storm. Okay, it won't fall. That was sure. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation. Devastation means total washing out or total destruction. Hmm? Total washing out or destruction. Devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 kilometers per hour. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crushing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roof and walls. So, in the midnight, some trees fell on their roof, and some part of the roof was damaged. Some part of the roof of Prashant's friend's house was damaged, and it was really very terrifying experience for them. Okay, then the next paragraph, the crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone. Wrought means worked. The crazed destruction wrought by means worked by, okay, or brought by, you can see here. The crazed destruction, crazed means mad. The crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. 36 hours means more than, say about one and a half days, okay, or even more than that. 36 hours, that means 1.5 days and night, if you count 1.5 days. Although wind speeds had reduced somewhat by the next morning, okay, but the surge of ocean water continued. The ocean water continued entering in the house even if the wind velocity had reduced. The speed of wind had reduced the next morning. Okay, to escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. So they climbed the roof because their house was sinking. So they climbed on the roof and saved their life. All their belongings were there in the house. They couldn't carry everything up there, but they might have carried certain things which might be useful for them, and they climbed the house. Anyway, Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the super cyclone. It was a super cyclone. Extremely strong winds were blowing. Super cyclone. Very, very devastating and terrible. Okay. In the gray light of the early morning. So when Prashant got up early in the morning, so storm occurred in the night, and they were on the roof just praying God and and trying to save their life. Okay, so in the early in the morning when Prashant got up, he saw the devastation. Okay, the destruction, the caused by the storm, and he was shocked. Okay, a raging deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. Only fractured cement houses still stood in few places. That means cement houses also were fractured. There were cracks in the houses. Some of them were partially broken. That was the scene which Prashant saw the next morning. It was very, very shocking. Bloated animal carcasses. Bloated means swollen. When water enters the dead body of the animals, the bodies of the animals they swell, isn't it? So that is called bloated animal carcasses and human corpses. So dead bodies of the animals and corpses means dead body of the human beings floated in every direction. So dead bodies were seen all around, dead bodies of the animals and the human beings. All round, even huge old trees had fallen. Two coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. This was a blessing in disguise because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. So, luckily, two coconut trees had fallen on the roof of his friend's house, and as they had nothing to eat, they plucked the tender coconuts and drank the this tender coconut water, and they ate the solids which is inside the this tender coconut ball. Okay, so in this way the family was able to survive for about several days after that that catastrophe. Hmm? Then for the next 2 days Prashant sat huddled with his friends family in the open on the rooftop. They froze in the cold and incessant rain. The rainwater washed away Prashant's tears. The only thought that uh, that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? That means his mother was already dead 7 years ago. His mother was already dead 7 years ago. So again, he is going to be bereaved of his family members. Is he going to lose the other family members? He was very much worried about it, isn't it? So now only thought on his mind was whether his family, the family members, survived the fury or anger of the super cyclone or not. So he was thinking of moving to his own village as soon as possible. Okay. 2 days later, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years, the rain ceased and the rainwater slowly began to recede. They started going down. The rainwaters going they started going down or receding. Okay. Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay. But the situation was still dangerous, and his friend's family pleaded with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. But Prashant knew he had to go. So Prashant was very resolute, very firm that he should go and see whether his family members are still okay, they are alive or not. Okay. So he equipped himself with a very sturdy and heavy stick he took, and then started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village. He started moving towards village. All around there was water. Okay, through the swollen flood waters. It was a journey he would never forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road. It was a long stick, and with the help of that stick, he located the road. Okay, to determine where the water was most shallow. In the picture, you can see he is using the stick and wading through the surging water. Okay, so where the water was most shallow, he was using the stick. At places it was waist deep, it was deep up to waist. Okay, and progress was slow. It was difficult for him to walk. At several points he lost the road and had to swim because the water was so much, even sometimes maybe some neck deep or something like that. Okay, so he had to swim. After some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. So he was lucky. On the way, he found two people. They were also going to the same village, his village, and they were his uncle's friend. In the picture, you can see those two men. Okay, he meets them on the way, and they all decide that all three should now move together. As they waded through the next paragraph, as they waded through the waters, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. Macabre means horrible or very ghastly or very gruesome, horrible scenes. Okay, very this horrible and very very unpleasant scenes they saw all around. Very unpleasant scenes, very macabre and horrible scenes. They had to push away many human bodies. So, what were these horrible scenes? They had to push away many human bodies, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. They were moving ahead, and the water current swept these dead bodies of these things against them. So they were with much difficulty just avoiding those uh, dead bodies. They were wading their way, they were making their way through the waters. In every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. That means in all the villages, the houses had fallen. Prashant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Catastrophe means this disaster. In this disaster, all his family members might have been killed, he thinks. Okay. Then the next paragraph, eventually means finally, or ultimately, Prashant reached his village Kalikuda. Kalikuda was the name of his village, and he reaches there 18 kilometers after journeying for 18 kilometers. His heart went cold. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants of its roof. Their house had vanished, it had collapsed, okay, and the remnants of its roof were there. The remaining parts, when the house had broken, the remains of the house roof could be seen there. The remains of the house roof could be seen there. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled means twisted and broken and twisted, okay, and they were hanging. So their belongings were caught, mangled, and twisted in the branches of the trees just visible above the dark waters. The belongings means the articles of their house were there, they were hanging there, and they could be seen. He saw it. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So, whenever such calamities occur, the Red Cross and the other NGOs, they erect the tents, and there they shelter the people. Okay, those who who survive such catastrophe, those people are given place or shelter in the camps. So Red Cross had erected a camp, and Prashant thinks that in that Red Cross camp he should go and try to find out the family members who had survived the storm. So now he goes to the Red Cross camp, Red Cross this camp, okay, and then in the next paragraph you see, among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother. That means his mother's mother. His mother's mother he saw. Weak with anger, she rushed to him. Sorry, weak with hunger, she rushed to him. She was very hungry, and she looked very weak. She rushes to him, her hands outstretched, stretching her hands. She runs towards him, her eyes brimming with tears. She was crying. It was a miracle they had long given him up for dead. It was a miracle that Prashant was alive, they thought, because they had thought that Prashant had died. This is what they had thought, but it was a miracle for them when they saw. It was a miracle for them when they saw that Prashant was alive and he had returned. Okay, quickly word spread and his extended family gathered around him. Other family members also came and joined him when they heard that the Prashant had returned. Okay, and hugged him tight in relief. Prashant anxiously scanned the mortally battered group. Mortally means, I have given the meaning here, varied or mixed. mixed. Battered means hit by the circumstances. Battered, hit, thrashed group. So mostly means there were his brother and sister, his uncles and aunts. They all seemed to be there. That's why it is called the motley group, mixed group of all these people, brother, sister, uncles, and aunts. They were there, but there is no mention of his father. So we can't say whether his father survived or he was dead. That is not clear here. Okay, but the other members he found in the Red Cross camp. Okay, by the next morning, as he took in the desperate as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. He tried to balance his mind. He tried to come out of this shock the next morning, because he thought that if he also, gives up all hope, then what would be the future of his family members and himself? Okay, so with a tough heart, he decided that he should get a grip over himself and face this situation boldly, very boldly. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter, in that Red Cross shelter. About 2,500 people were there, and they were all terribly grieved. They were all agonized. They were in great sadness. Okay, 86. Why were they in sadness? You see, 86 lives were lost in the village. All the 96 houses had been washed away. It was their fourth day at the shelter. So far, they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Tumult of people means a large number of people. So green coconuts also had exhausted, and they had nothing to eat. So now the first problem was to manage food. First problem was to manage food for them. So Prashant, all all of 19 years, he was 19-year-old boy, young boy, okay, decided to step in as leader of his village if no one else did. Thus, he thought that he should become a leader, he should lead and try to reorganize all the things, try to organize all the things. So he organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. So there was a house of a merchant. That house also had collapsed, but some rice bags were there in his house. So he convinced the merchant that he should give rice to these people who are dying of hunger. Okay, so this time the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly means victoriously, successfully they returned with the rice, wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. No one cared that the rice was already rotting because the rice bags also were dipped in water. So rice was rotting, but still it was necessary for their survival. So they had to eat it. Branches from the fallen trees were gathered to light the reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors of the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies, fill their stomach. They got the rice to eat for the first time in 4 days. Till now, they had been somehow surviving on the tender coconuts, as we have seen earlier. Now this was the first task, to feed the people, that Prashant and his volunteer friends had done successfully. Okay, now his next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth means waste material, okay, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. So um, uh, to this the to give a help to the injured people, their wounds, to apply medication to their wounds, and do the bandaging and all. mm. This was the task, and cleaning was the task. Cleaning the whole this their shelter, their camp of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses. Cleaning and tending the wounds of the injured people. This was the task, and Prashant and his volunteer friends do this task. This was the second thing they do. Okay. Then on the fifth day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels, because the government also starts rescue operation. They know that the storm had now ceased and the people might be dying of hunger, so they uh, drop some food stuff. Particularly the army is deployed, so helicopters also are deployed, army helicopters, military helicopters, and they drop the food packets. uh, it then did not return. Once the packets were dropped, then the helicopter did not return. The youth task force gathered empty utensils from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the waters around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs. So Prashant and his his friends decided that the children should lie on the ground with the plates and the other utensils on their stomach. So when the helicopter comes, he will just see that the people are dying of hunger, even, and they will drop the food packets for them. They will drop the food packets for them. So why it was done? These utensils, these pots were um, put on the stomachs, to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. The message got through, and after that, the helicopter made regular rounds of the shelter, airdropping food and other basic needs. So it was successful. So in this way, regular supply of food also was managed somehow. Then the next paragraph is there. You see, Prashant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. They had lost their parents. A large number of children had lost their parents. They had become orphaned. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. A special shelter was built for the children, and they were sheltered there. Women were mobilized to look after them, while the men secured food and materials for the shelter. Food and material for the shelter was managed by men folk. Okay. And the women folk was given the task of looking after the orphaned children. So in this way, the work was shared by men and women. They also came forward when Prashant just, I mean, requested them, and he did their leadership and he convinced them. So the men and women of the camp came forward to help the children. So in this way, it was managed by the community itself without the government's help. Till now, we see that without government's much help from the government, the community, the people themselves are managing the affairs in the camp, in that shelter. Well, the next paragraph. As the weeks passed, Prashant was quick to recognize that the women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. Women and children were very much grieved because they had nothing to do, isn't it? And here the Prashant sensed it, he understood it. So what he did, he persuaded or convinced the women. He persuaded or convinced the women to start working in the food for work program started by an NGO. So he said women will work they will work and they will earn not money but food. They will be paid not in money but in food. So food for work program, one NGO had started, and Prashant said women will go and work for that NGO. Okay, and for the children, he organized sports events. He himself loved to play cricket, and so he organized cricket matches for children. So children played, and the women worked in the food for work program. So in this way, women and children were engaged. So now they have got some work to do. So their grief was little bit relieved. They felt relieved from the grief, from their agony and sorrow. Okay, so Prashant engaged with other volunteers in helping the widows and children to pick up the broken pieces of their lives. The initial government plan. Now the author is talking here about the government plan, because when such disasters occur, the government comes forward with the plans. Okay, with the plans to do some rescue operation and to do the resettlement and rehabilitation of the people. Okay, government comes out with the plans. So at the initial level, the first plan, the initial government plan was to set up institutions for orphans and widows. For orphan children and widows, they should set up some institutions. The government was of this opinion, and they had come out with the plan. Okay, for setting up institutions for orphan children and the widows. However, this step was successfully resisted, but Prashant and his group and the other people, they opposed it. Why they opposed? It is given here, as it was felt that in such institutions, children would grow up without love. Children can get love only they live in the house, only they live in the community. If they live in the institutions of the orphan, there they will not get the affection which they get in the family. So that's why they opposed. And why and what will be the plight of the widows in such institutions? And that is in the next line. And widows would suffer from stigma and loneliness. Stigma is a blot, or in Hindi you call kalank, isn't it? They will say that they are the widows, and they are all residing or living, or they are settled in an institution for them, special institution for them. People will talk like that. So he thought, no, that is not a good idea, that the children and women should be kept in the institutions. It is not the good idea, because the women will, suffer loneliness and stigma. He thought, Prashant and his friends and the other people in the camp. So they opposed the government's plans. And what they did, no, what should be done to these women and these children? What was their plan? So they implemented their plan. Prashant's group believed orphans should be resettled in their own community itself, possibly in new foster families. Foster means this unreal family, that means not the real fathers and mothers, but those who act as fathers and mothers, and they take care of the children. Okay, they are the foster families. Okay, so possibly in new foster families made up of childless widows and children without adult care. So the children should be taken care by the community. Okay, the widows who had lost their children, they will take care of these children who had survived. Okay, because they had become now childless widows. They had lost their husbands. Okay, and they had lost their own children. So they will take care of the children. In this way, in the community itself, the shelter for the children should be managed. This is what Prashant and his group thought. And children without adult care, children were left without care of adults. So now when the women folk starts taking care uh, of these children, then the children will feel at home in the community, and they will not be isolated. They will get love. They will get love, and in this way, their growth will be proper. This is what Prashant and his group thinks, and that's why they oppose the government plan, and they came out with their own plan. So this is this paragraph, and then the next paragraph, the last paragraph, It is 6 months after the devastation of the super cyclone. Now, the 6 months time passed after that catastrophe. 6 months time passed. This time, Prashant's wounded spirit has healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. Now, Prashant has successfully balanced himself. His hurt spirit is now healed up, okay? And he doesn't think of his own pain. He is not selfish to think of his own pain. So he thinks of the children and women and other people who had to be rehabilitated and resettled. He thinks of them, and the women and children and the other people, they have full faith in Prashant. His hands, how you see here, his handsome youthful face is what the widows and orphaned children of his village seek out most in their darkest hour of grief. So whenever there is in trouble, women folk and the orphaned children and even the other people, they look up to Prashant, and they always remember what he had done for them. So in this way, Prashant emerges as a successful leader during this time of catastrophe. So there, my dear boys and girls, we end this lesson by Harsh Mander. That's all for today. The questions are there in the end of the lesson. You attempt them. In case of any difficulty, you can just discuss with me. Uh, thank you for listening. Bye.